During the Great Depression, countries all over the world experienced the need for massive changes in infrastructure. While some countries focused on making public transportation changes and implementing more public housing, others focused on creating massive new road systems and enhancing social infrastructure in relation to healthcare and schooling, whatever was necessary to improve conditions in such a dark time. Australia, however, gave veterans farmland in the West, which was then migrated to by roughly 20,000 emus. This was known as the Great Emu War, wherein many emus trampled fences, ate crops, and more or less ruined tons of farmers' livelihoods. Afterwards, the military stepped in to handle the emu problem. However, the emus were formidable and resilient. They were surprisingly quick and very durable. And after weeks of fighting, with tens of thousands of rounds fired, the emus were only down a few hundred, resulting in a win for the emus. But none of that actually matters though, because Australia isn't real. Anyways, today's video is about Yvonne, and we're going to be focusing on the big question: if cryo, why hot? And also, how to actually play her. My name is Braxophone, but you can call me Brax, and I'm going to be going over everything you need to know about Yvonne, from how to play her to her best teams and gear. So let's get into it. Every single part of Yvonne that I've seen has been against my will. Despite that, I think Fluorite is giving her a run for her money in competitive ranked gooning. But I have something for you guys that's better than gooning. Top tier Yvonne DPS. Yvonne is a fairly strong DPS character against bosses, but can fall off a lot with multiple enemies on field. There's some ways to resolve that issue, but it will always exist to some degree, which is why despite Yvonne having the second most powerful midriff in Enfield, she's not the highest character on the DPS charts. Except for when you're against bosses, where she turns into an absolute machine. But either way, I'll go over how you can make her the best that she can be. Obviously, you'll need gear. Stop looking at that. Despite her having literal bombs, Yvonne's basic attack sequence is very single target, and as a result, it can feel like you're not doing much damage. But you actually do want to play her on field, since she has a unique passive that makes her instantly deal a final strike when her skill applies solidification, which means that she can get some SP back on a pretty regular basis and use an attack with a higher multiplier every now and then. The final strike also gets bonus damage dealt, which makes her feel much stronger. Yvonne's skill is AoE, and when it hits an enemy with cryo or nature infliction on it, it absorbs the infliction stacks and forces solidification, which is relatable since she has also forced my solidification. When solidification is applied, Yvonne gets a bunch of energy for each stack of nature or cryo arts infliction that she absorbs, and the multiplier of her skill also increases based on how many nature or cryo inflictions were present. Keep in mind, if the enemy doesn't have any nature or cryo though, her skill doesn't get any of those benefits, and under those conditions, it wouldn't be worth using in most cases. Now, a cool thing about solidification is that the more inflictions that are on an enemy before solidifying, the longer the solidification lasts. The most basic way of understanding it is that the baseline solidification is 6 seconds, and every infliction adds 1 second on top of that. It's not exactly that amount, but for your own sake and mental health, let's just call it that. If you have 4 inflictions on the enemy before solidifying, they will be solidified for just over 9 seconds, which can cover a lot of the damage dealt. On top of that, her skill solidification combos with her own combo skill up to once every 19 seconds, where after a final strike deals damage to a solidified enemy, she deploys one of her little robots that deals cryo damage to enemies repeatedly and also pulls enemies closer to it. Yvonne also gains energy when the combo skill deals damage, and combined with her skill's extra energy gain, Yvonne's able to whip it out frequently, and by it I mean the clock. Her combo skill also applies solidification for its duration, and due to how long it lasts, her combo skill solidification is essentially always 8 seconds, which is great for Yvonne's damage, specifically her ultimate. Yvonne's ultimate enhances her basic attacks and makes them all grant her crit rate buffs. At max stacks, she'll get a crit damage buff, and her last attack becomes a modified final strike that's AoE and hits for more damage than AI has done to the entire tech industry. Yvonne's kit synergizes with some pretty specific units, but namely herself. She needs cryo or nature infliction in order to really max everything out. If you're playing her with the right team setups, she should be able to set herself up for a powerful skill that will solidify and allow her to final strike the solidified enemy, which will proc her combo skill. The main thing you want to make sure happens before she ults though is that enemies are solidified, because using her skill during her ult won't pause her timer, and also you don't want her ult to get interrupted. Holding that basic attack attack is a whole 8 trigram 64 palm. You want to make sure that your third basic hits all 64 times. It's specifically important for enemies to be solidified when you're playing Yvonne, and though it's not hard to get solidified with Yvonne shooting at you, it is a huge benefit to her, since her other passive will increase her crit damage by 40% against solidified enemies and 20% against cryo-inflicted enemies. I know that all sounds like a lot of random mumbo-jumbo, but I promise it'll all make sense in the next section when I showcase everything in action. But first, for ability priority, seriously stop looking there. You'll want to prioritize her ultimate, then her basic attacks, her skill, then her combo skill. Arknights Endfield is a really simple game to play, as long as you're not playing Yvonne. For some reason, Hypergriff made most of the cryo characters based around shatter and physical debuffs, while having the 2 cryo DPS characters revolve around not shattering at all. I'm gonna go over the main stuff for you to know when playing Yvonne, but every team's gonna have a completely different rotation based on the cooldowns of combo skills, so keep that in mind. And of course, I'll show some free-to-play teams as well. So everybody go ahead and strap on, and let's get into Yvonne's teams. Okay, wait, hold up, pause. Before I get into the really deep stuff, I need you guys to know that this character has been an absolute disaster to figure out, because Endfield has so much more rotational flexibility than the other gachas and so many more passive buff triggers that it's like a huge pain in the ass to theory crap. I'm very lucky to know people like Catalyst Online and Lin Zero because they've done a majority of the heavy lifting for calcs, so shout out to them. With that said, I've had to rewrite this guide 3 times now in the past 48 hours due to finding some crazy ridiculous change or tech or something of that sort. So if there's something not in here that other people have talked about, it's likely that I removed it because it's either less optimal than what we found out later, or it's good and there's just no way in hell to talk about every single possible Yvonne combination of team, gear, weapon, and rotation. Anyways, there's another new Giga optimized Yvonne setup, but I'm just going to talk about it later in the video because there's a lot of caveats and I don't really want to rewrite this entire section again. This team and rotation section includes what I deem to be the best Yvonne team and rotation for the average player and what still nets very, very high damage. So I hope you guys enjoy it, and if you're absolute freaks about min-maxing, you guys can check out the end of the video too. All right, let's get back to it. In my opinion, the easiest Yvonne team to play with the best results at the moment is Yvonne, Gilberta, Alesh, and Jaihi. Jaihi is going to be a staple in most Yvonne teams because not only does she provide healing and endgame when your items are turned off, but she also has a combo skill that applies cryo infliction. On top of that, she can amp cryo and nature damage with her ultimate, as well as all arts damage with her skill. The 2 more flexible spots are Alesh and Gilberta. Alesh can recover a lot of SP for the team, but he's mostly strong with her because he can help buff your team's attack with Thermite Cutter and his third potential. Attack is one of Yvonne's lower stats, so massive attack buffs make her much stronger. And on top of that, he can run the Frontier set for more damage bonus to the entire team. The main thing you need to make sure of when you're playing him is that you essentially never use his skill, since it can cause issues for the art's reaction order. But if you play him correctly in the correct rotation, that will never be an issue and you'll always have his ult up on time. And lastly, Best Girl is one of my favorites to run with Yvonne because who wouldn't want to have her on the field? She's so cute. Gilberta is a fantastic support for Yvonne because 1, she's able to help Yvonne's AoE portions of her kit, like her skill, hit multiple enemies. 2, she'll give guards, casters, and supporter characters extra ult gain. And 3, she debuffs enemies with a massive art susceptibility, up to 29% at level 9, which grows more if the enemy has a physical vulnerability. Speaking of physical, if you're free to play, you can actually play Estella instead of Gilberta, because despite Estella being able to shatter solidification, she also has a cryo infliction. So as long as you make sure to only proc Estella's combo skill or use her ultimate when Yvonne is not using hers, you can still get crazy Yvonne damage while still maxing Estella's. And I have no idea what happened to my voice in that sentence. If you want a full free-to-play friendly team, you can also play Fluorite. Fluorite is able to apply nature infliction with her skill, but the more important parts are her combo skill and ultimate, which will allow her to inflict either nature or cryo, even as a nature character. One of her biggest downsides is that you can't stare too long. One of her biggest downsides is how slow her combo is to proc, but with the right gear, you can reduce that a fair bit. Overall, Fluorite's teams end up being a lot worse, but she's hot, so I'm gonna play her anyways. If you're down horrendous, you gotta make some sacrifices though, like playing whatever this is. Shout out to Snowshine, who can also inflict cryo. Not my favorite personally, but she can work for SP return and her cryo infliction. Just not as fluidly as running someone like Alesh or even Estella. And lastly for teammates, Last Right is also able to dish out some bonkers damage, as well as inflict cryo on enemies. But personally, if you're gonna make a team with with last right in it, I would just build the whole thing around her instead of Yvonne because she's actually stronger than Yvonne is. As far as rotations go, while some teams like the Fluorite one are absolutely crazy, and I wouldn't really recommend the team for that reason, the Yvonne Alesh team is really easy to play. Your goal in this team is to try and get multiple cryo inflictions, usually 2, and then use Yvonne's skill to absorb them and gain a bunch of energy while also dishing out more damage. Then you're gonna stack ultimates and other buffs during Yvonne's to get mega damage. The rotation for the Alesh team is really simple. You'll start off with Gilberta's skill twice to get 2 nature inflictions, group enemies, and also charge her ult. After finishing what should be your second final strike with Yvonne, but it sometimes is your third, you'll want to use her skill to absorb the nature infliction and use the free Yvonne final strike to proc her combo. Then Gilberta and Yvonne's combo should be up with Alesh's right after, which will give you an attack buff and more SP. Then you'll want to use Jaihe's skill and combo skill twice for 2 cryo inflictions. Follow up with Yvonne's skill, which should proc Gilberta, Yvonne, and Alesh's combo skills again. Then by using Jaihe's ult, you can get nature and cryo amp, followed up by a Gilberta skill, Alesh ultimate, and finally Yvonne ultimate with stacked buffs and solidification on the enemy. After a few seconds, or starting right before your third enhanced basic animation, kinda hard to see, I know, Gilberta ult for the massive art susceptibility that only lasts for 5 seconds, and you should catch all of the heavy hitting damage. In other words, do this. The best part about this rotation is that it loops really easily, so you can kind of just start it over again from the beginning if the boss isn't dead yet. This is a side note, but I had to actually nerf my Yvonne by using a level 1 wedge because the endgame bosses were dying too fast. Hypergriff, please make a harder game mode. Hopefully this section helped you understand how to play her because all of this is way too dank. Every Yvonne team has a different rotation and it just comes down to knowing the characters, and of course giving them all the right gear too, like giving Jaihe and Gilberta the Sheer set for team damage buffs, Fluorite or Alesh on the Frontier set for more team damage bonus, and if you're running Estella, the Type 50 Yingling armor for her personal damage. As for Yvonne's gear though, that'll be in the next section. If I had an eye tracker on this video, I'd be so cooked. Yvonne's gear in Enfield is pretty simple and straightforward. Crit isn't actually that good in Enfield, not like with the other gacha games at least. But since Yvonne has a bunch built into her kit, she can actually benefit from stacking crit a reasonable amount. And because of that, her best set overall is going to be a combination of MI security set pieces. Like with Lavatane, you can run a build with a bit of ult gain efficiency to make her combat flow more consistent. This build is going to use Bone Crusher heavy armor for the ult gain efficiency, MI security hands PPE, and 2 MI security toolkits. It's specifically great in her Alesh team, which happens to be one of, if not the best performing team, and with the right rotation, it's completely necessary to run the ult gain chest piece, otherwise you will be literally 1 energy short of ult every single rotation. However, if you're playing essentially any other team, you'll want to run MI security overalls instead, since that'll get you more damage in any rotation where Yvonne has more skills or more inflictions to absorb for more ult energy. Like with Lavatane, Link Slab is also very good on Yvonne, but you need to make sure that you're using at least 3 skills per rotation, otherwise you're not going to have enough energy to consistently loop it. But overall, if you're going to be running 3 of the MI security pieces already, then you might as well replace the second toolkit with a Link Slab for the massive stat boost. I'd only recommend doing this though if you have completely maxed out the amount of crit rate that you're able to get from her weapon and other gear pieces. Another thing worth mentioning is that the MI security hands PPE T1 are decent when your Yvonne isn't fully built and needs the crit rate. I wouldn't use them once you're fully invested though, since you really won't need that much crit rate, at least compared to the basic attack bonus. For early game players, you can just focus on matching main stats like intellect and agility to increase her overall attack. I don't really want to go into every tier of this set because it turned the short video into an hour-long video essay. You guys have no idea how relieving it is to just know what gears are best and not have to talk about the alternatives most of the time though. It makes these videos way shorter so you guys can go back to whatever you were doing before this, like grinding your RuneScape Iron Man or Jester gooning. For Yvonne's best weapons, her signature artsy tyrannical is obviously best because it gives a ton of intellect, crit rate, and cryo damage bonus, but that requires you to have weapon banner currency, and I'm sure most of you spent all of that on Degradation Girl. There are also some absolutely fantastic weapons that free-to-play players can use, like if you happen to get Wedge during any of your other weapon pulls or from some sort of selector, which is her second best weapon. Wedge is going to give you a big crit rate buff and a ton of arts damage bonus, making it perfectly fit fit Yvonne's kit. Or if you got the upgraded free-to-play Battle Pass, you'll be able to get her dedicated Battle Pass weapon Navigator, which is also solid. It's gonna give you a huge cryo damage buff as well as some crit rate. Clannable comes after both for its arts bonus and debuff on enemies, and after those, Opus the Living, which also has a big crit rate and arts damage buff. Here's a chart comparing them all if you want to see the actual numbers though. And once you pick one of these weapons, all you'll need is a solid essence that matches all three stats to really be solidified. You guys get it? Because like Yvonne's whole thing is solidification, right? So you take the solidification from Yvonne, but then you're like, oh, I have a solid build. My build has been solidified. The other thing you can do to increase Yvonne's power is to get copies of her. So let's talk about those next. Now, the thing to know with Yvonne's copies is okay, so after meticulously crafting the most perfect Yvonne guide of all time, I found out everything was not so perfect 3 different times. So I want to talk about what we know to be the best Yvonne setup so far, but more specifically why I don't recommend it to the majority of players. Instead of using the build that I recommended for the majority, you can use all of this. By giving Yvonne Link Slap and by using her skill 3 times instead of twice, she can get her ult regularly within rotation. By focusing Jaehy on a full int setup instead of Gironite, and by leaving Gilberta on Gironite, you can max out Jaehy's int to provide the maximum buffs to the team. You should be able to see all of the theoretical builds on screen right now. Basically, you're going to be playing much more actively, pre-skilling with Jaehy before using Yvonne's skill after Gilberta's 1 nature infliction at the start. You need to use Alesh's ult right before the 2nd combo skill from Jaehy, and ult with Gilberta after the 3rd basic sequence of her ult for susceptibility. I didn't really go over the rotation in full, which looks something like this. Essentially, if you follow this rotation to a T with the right gear and weapons, it's the best team and rotation setup for Yvonne that we know of, but the entire rotation gets fucked and you lose 1 or 2 of the buffs or ults that you need to max the damage if you even so much as breathe at the wrong interval. So I don't really recommend this to a majority of people. Anyways, despite how much joy I get from looking at Yvonne's backside, I don't really want to keep talking about her because this whole rewrite thing has been incredibly stressful and sad. Here's the TLDR of why not to do this unless you're Gojo, and I'll see you guys in the next one.